My stepsister instigated me to break off my engagement and then killed me. However, she wore a haute couture wedding dress and married Vincent, who was once my fiancé. But on that very night, she was burned to death by Vincent in the bridal chamber. When I opened my eyes again, I went back to the time when I was arguing with Vincent about canceling our engagement. My stepsister was sowing discord. Sister, it's obvious that he doesn't love you. When you marry, you should marry a man who loves you. Your marriage is an arranged one between the families, there's no love in it. I don't want you to live such a life. But I pretended not to hear her and took Vincent's arm. Are you free today? Let's go and get our marriage license first. My head hurt so much. There was a voice chattering nonstop in my ear, which annoyed me. The words were so intense and sounded somewhat familiar. Sister, it's obvious that he doesn't love you. When you marry, you should marry a man who loves you. Your marriage is an arranged one between the families, there's no love in it. I don't want you to live such a life. I suddenly woke up in shock because the person speaking was none other than Anya, who pushed me down from the 27th floor. I looked at her suspiciously and then surveyed the interior decoration around me. This was my home, my room. Was I reborn? Seeing my intense reaction, Anya in front of me thought I had suddenly come to my senses and continued to spout her fallacies at me with great gusto. Sister, if you marry him, your life will be ruined. I sneered inwardly. In my previous life, it was because I listened to her words that my life was ruined. It seemed that God still pitied me and gave me a chance to start over. In my past life, my stepsister put on an act of being an innocent little flower in front of the whole family. In the name of doing me good, she not only persuaded me to remarry but also asked me to invest in projects in remote areas. I was so stupid back then that I believed her words. Unexpectedly, all those projects were shell companies she hired just to cheat me out of all my money. After being discovered by me, she was afraid that I would take revenge, so she directly pushed me down from the 27th floor and disguised it as suicide. Finally, she took my place and married Vincent. Now that this hideous face was right in front of me, I suppressed my urge to tear her apart directly and decided to think long term. After all, games are more interesting when played slowly. Mr. Vincent has arrived. Just as I was thinking, Edwin knocked on the door respectfully outside. Hearing this, Anya hurriedly took my hand and pulled me up, just in time. Go and tell him quickly that you won't marry him. I followed Anya downstairs to the first floor and immediately saw the calm and noble man sitting on the sofa. In my previous life, after I died, I wandered around like a lost soul but couldn't stay too far away from Vincent. That's when I saw that he found evidence of Anya killing me before the wedding. On the wedding night, he set fire to the ancestral house of the Vincent family. He avenged me but also ruined himself. Thinking of this, I looked at Vincent with tears in my eyes. There was actually a bit of panic in his usually calm eyes. He walked towards me with big strides. Don't cry. If you really don't want to get married, I won't force you. Anya was still winking at me desperately beside me. I took Vincent's arm firmly, and my voice was as firm as if I was about to join the Communist Party of China. Yes, I want to marry you. Let's go and get our marriage license now. I ignored Vincent's astonishment and Anya's furious face and directly led people to rush out of the house aggressively. Outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, Vincent held me back and said in a calm tone, Aaliyah, our marriage is for long-term interests. I hope you're not acting on impulse. In my previous life, I was discouraged by Vincent's cold face, thinking that he had no feelings for me or even disliked me. Coupled with my stepsister's instigation, I broke off the engagement in a fit of anger. It wasn't until after I died and lingered around him that I saw that he was always holding a small wooden box in a daze. When I got closer to look, I found that it was the gift I gave him, and it was full of photos of me from childhood to adulthood. Besides being shocked, I couldn't help sighing that Vincent loved me in a rather abnormal way. I boldly kissed him on the face. Isn't love always impulsive? Looking at the little red marriage certificate in my hand, I felt a bit dreamy. I had become a wife so easily. It was time to celebrate. I put my arm around Vincent's neck and took a selfie of us kissing in his astonished expression. Then I posted the photo along with the marriage certificate on Moments. Vincent still had that expressionless look, but the tips of his ears had already turned bright red. I saw through it at a glance and deliberately teased him. Vincent, you're so shy. Vincent turned around and left in silence. I was in a great mood and walked to the car but refused to move. You have to say, Princess, please get in the car. After a few seconds of staring at each other, he finally took the initiative to give in, smiled helplessly and opened the front passenger door for me. Princess, please get in the car. Vincent first sent me home and asked me to take some daily personal clothes to the new house. Before getting out of the car, he stopped me. Stay away from your stepsister and stepmother. They're not good people. I only knew that Anya had tried to harm me several times. I didn't expect that my stepmother Faye was also involved. Come to think of it, without someone giving her advice behind the scenes, how would she have the guts to harm me? I'm afraid my father also knew something about it. I nodded in agreement and got out of the car. As soon as I entered the house, I saw Anya sitting beside Faye, crying with red eyes. I deliberately went over to comfort her. Why is Anya crying? Who bullied you? I'll ask your brother-in-law to avenge you. Anya's face turned even uglier. Judging by her impatient look, she seemed about to curse. Fortunately, her mother came out to smooth things over with a laugh. It's okay. It's just that she's reluctant to part with you since you're getting married. I suddenly realized and smiled brightly, deliberately making the two of them uncomfortable. So that's how it is. I thought Anya was so eager to persuade me before because she liked her brother-in-law. As soon as these words came out, both of them froze. I got up and went upstairs. Standing in the middle of the stairs, I slowly turned around. Just kidding. Don't be so nervous. Probably because she was feeling guilty, Anya didn't try to trick me into talking by pretending to help this time. I was glad to have some peace and quiet. I casually picked up a few sets of pajamas and changes of clothes and went downstairs. Anyway, given Vincent's personality, he would definitely fill my wardrobe. That was a certainty. Before leaving, in order to maintain my foolish persona, I also enthusiastically invited Anya to visit Vincent's ancestral house when she was free. I kept that fake smile on my face until it became stiff. As soon as I got into Vincent's car, I immediately changed my expression. The person beside me noticed my mood change and handed me a can of sweet milk. It was a brand that only my family members knew I liked. It seems that you know my preferences very well? Sort of. It was a very brief answer, but it seemed that he himself didn't even notice that there was a strong sense of pride in his tone. I raised my eyebrows, suddenly curious about how much Vincent really knew about me and also wanted to know when he started liking me. When the car drove to the new mansion of the Vincent family and just stopped steadily, I grabbed his tie and pulled him over to kiss him, whispering to coax him into answering my questions. Vincent, do you like me? He seemed to be dazed by my kiss and was surprisingly obedient, cooperating with me in the question and answer. Yes. Since when? Since childhood, since the first time I saw you. It had been such a long time. Calculating carefully, it was more than 10 years. When I let go of him, I realized that his lips were a bit swollen from my bullying, bright red, and they looked especially matching with his ascetic face. I wouldn't say Vincent was abnormal anymore. I was also abnormal. Vincent was busy with business affairs, so after sending me to the door, he left. Before leaving, he didn't forget to hand me a card and told me to use it to buy whatever I needed as a wedding gift. Don't look at the things needed for the wedding for now. Wait until I finish dealing with the company's affairs and I'll accompany you to choose them together. I nodded in agreement and turned around to enter the villa that I had only touched after I died. The interior decoration was not much different from what I remembered in my previous life. It was still as cold and cheerless. Only Vincent's bedroom on the second floor seemed to have a bit of a human touch. Vincent started from scratch. He was aloof from others since childhood and became even more so when he grew up. When he was a child, as the youngest son of the Vincent family, he did enjoy a period of glory. But later, it was revealed that he was just an adopted son, and a flood of malice instantly rushed towards the 5-year-old Vincent. The first time I met Vincent was when he was being bullied. I carried garden shears and stood in front of him, saying that I would stab anyone who bullied him to death. Thinking about it this way, it's no wonder Vincent fell in love with me. If I were in his shoes, I would love to. Later, Vincent's father passed away, and the Vincent family gradually went downhill. It hit rock bottom especially after both of Vincent's elder brothers were imprisoned. It was Vincent who took over the dilapidated group again. After years of painstaking efforts, he managed to turn it around. Now, the Vincent family is Vincent's alone. I lifted my foot and went upstairs. Relying on my memory, I found a room in the corner on the second floor. In my previous life, Vincent lingered at the door several times but didn't go in, which made me extremely curious about what was inside. The door opened. It wasn't locked. I turned on the light, and the scene in front of me made my blood freeze in an instant. Everywhere, on the walls, on the table, and scattered on the floor, were all my photos. There were selfies and candid shots, ranging from when I was 5 years old to 23 years old, and even some from the day before yesterday. In the middle of the room was a big bed, and beside it, in the trash can, there was a pile of crumpled toilet paper. It wasn't hard to imagine what Vincent had been doing here. Aaliyah. I turned around when I heard the voice and found Vincent standing at the door. It seemed that he had rushed back. Unfortunately, he was a bit late. He opened his mouth when he looked at me but didn't say anything in the end. I walked around the room casually. Finally, I sat on the bed and whistled flirtatiously at the pile of things in the trash can. Quite often, huh? Now that I'm here, you don't have to do it by yourself anymore. Vincent's eyes flickered. He walked over in a few steps and half knelt in front of me. Aren't you scared? Your husband is a possessive freak. I leaned closer, tightening my grip on his tie. Vincent, actually, you're not in a very safe situation yourself. I loafed around at home for a few days and finally waited for my stepsister to contact me on her own initiative. Listening to her words on the phone that were exactly the same as in my previous life, I rolled my eyes and put on a fake smile. Anya, you're so kind. You always think of me for everything. I think what you said makes sense. So when shall we sign the contract? The person on the other end of the phone was a bit confused. Ah? Contract? Of course she was confused. After all, in my previous life, I transferred the money to her account without hesitation and entrusted everything to her. Later, with just a sentence of, I can't do anything if there's a loss, she dismissed me, and I just accepted my bad luck and didn't pursue it further. My brain in my previous life was probably made of bean curd dregs. In fact, there were signs of something wrong everywhere, but I believed her from start to finish. Anya stammered and changed her words, saying that she would send the contract to my home another day. She changed her words so quickly. It seemed that Faye was also beside her. I readily agreed. 3 days later, Anya came to my door. As soon as Anya entered the door, she looked around. I handed her a glass of juice and said at the right time, Vincent isn't here. He has something to do at the company. Anya immediately came to her senses, handed the contract to me with an awkward smile. I didn't look for brother-in-law. I just wanted to see the new house. Sister, this is the contract that I've signed in advance. There's no problem with it. Don't you trust me? You can just sign it directly. I signed my full name without even looking at it. When signing the other copy, my hand shook on purpose and knocked over the juice. Sorry. I'm so sorry. It's all my fault for being so clumsy. Anya was about to lose her temper but endured it for the sake of money. She held the dripping contract and comforted me. It's okay, but I only brought these 2 copies. I'm afraid we'll have to do it another day. I have a printer at home. I'll scan it and sign it again. Anya, feel free to look around. Wait for me. I'll be done soon. Anya hesitated for a moment. In the end, she couldn't resist the allure of Vincent's ancestral house and nodded, watching me go upstairs. As soon as I entered the study, I took out the contract that I had prepared beforehand, made some changes to the beginning and the end, and then went out. In the cloakroom, Anya was holding one of my dresses and measuring it against herself. When she saw me coming, she put on an affectionate look and acted coquettishly towards me. Sister, this dress is so beautiful. Can you give it to me? Take it if you like it. The contract has been printed. Come and have a look. Anya was afraid that I would regret it. Just like what I did before, she signed it without looking at it. I signed my name right after her. Didn't expect that, did you? I suddenly became smarter. This contract stipulated harshly that she had to give me profits or dividends equal to or greater than 350% of the investment amount within 3 months, and even return the principal. If she couldn't do it, then we would meet in court. I casually transferred 40 million to Anya. She was so happy that she couldn't suppress the corners of her mouth from turning up. She made up an excuse casually and took the dress back home. 05 Vincent had been busy for half a month and finally had the chance to fulfill his promise of going shopping with me. In the empty shopping mall, I stretched out my hand and watched Vincent try on rings for me. You're really going all out. You even cleared the mall just for shopping. I would feel uncomfortable if someone stared at you for too long. Vincent didn't even raise his head. He took off the ring and handed it back. None of them are worthy of you. Let's get them customized. I didn't say anything and followed him into the car, chatting casually while sitting in the passenger seat. I saw the void contract in the study. Did Anya come to trouble you again? I nodded and then shook my head. She did come, but she didn't succeed. Instead, I tricked her. I can help you deal with her. Vincent's words always made me feel that he was going to handle the problem through some underhanded means. I glanced at him sideways and refused. I'll do it myself. It's not enough to just deal with her. There are helpers behind her. But you can help me check the relationship among the 3 people in our family. I always feel that it's not just as simple as an ordinary second marriage. Vincent gave a hum as a response and parked the car steadily before leading me out. It wasn't until I saw that Vincent even had to have his assets verified to enter that I had a direct understanding of what he meant by customization. The building in the very center of City A. In the flat floor covering an area of hundreds of square meters, there were few finished wedding dresses in sight. There were only dozens of workers making them by hand in a rush. The spiral staircase leads directly to the upper floor, where there are jewelry items of the same brand. Vincent took my hand and led me into the design room. With the introduction of the designer, he accompanied me to finalize the basic style and matching jewelry. He casually brushed my stray hairs behind my ear and kissed my temple. It's only once in a lifetime. Choose what you like. Don't try to save money for me. Although the Aaliyah family is also wealthy, by comparison, I somehow got a dreamy feeling of marrying into a wealthy family. I didn't stand on ceremony with him and picked the most expensive set. After having the measurements taken and paying the deposit, I took Vincent for a stroll and stopped at a women's shoe counter. Vincent raised his hand to decline the clerk's service and then turned to ask me, which one do you like, or do you like them all? I didn't answer. I picked a pair of black high heels and sat on the sofa. Vincent followed and crouched down to put the shoes on for me. I lowered my eyes and wiggled my toes, then lifted my leg, and the heel of the shoe firmly stepped on his chest. Vincent, do they look good? Vincent naturally held my leg. I clearly saw his Adam's apple move, and his gaze towards me was burning with fire. They look good. I think so too. Then pay for them. I had already vaguely sensed that Vincent was a bit different from ordinary people. This little test proved that I was right. That day, Vincent didn't even wait until we got home. He drove the car directly to an old neighborhood, and the passion flared up in an instant. The next day, I was woken up by the ringing of Vincent's mobile phone. His company's public relations team asked him to look at the news. I leaned on his shoulder and accompanied him, kissing the marks on his neck from time to time with my lips. On the screen, the picture of me stepping on Vincent with my foot yesterday took up a large part, and the caption read, "The eldest daughter of the Aaliyah family is dissatisfied with the current marriage situation and blatantly insulted Vincent, the rising star in the business world. Why is your name mentioned while I'm just called the eldest daughter of the Aaliyah family?" Vincent kissed me soothingly and then said to the person on the phone, "Don't worry about it. Let it be." I was just about to lie down and go back to sleep when Vincent handed me his phone. I glanced at it and almost burst out laughing. Anya was speaking in a pretentious way on the phone, defining me as capricious and bullying, with just a few words. "Brother Vincent, I've seen the news. I'm really sorry. I'll apologize to you on behalf of my sister. My sister is the daughter of the Aaliyah family. She's been spoiled since childhood. Unlike me, I have to watch others' faces at home, and anyone can bully me. Brother Vincent, if you feel wronged, you can talk to me. Anya will definitely cheer you up." Tongue out, Vincent had hidden his deep affection for me very well before, so most people, like Anya, thought that our marriage was just a business alliance without any emotional foundation. I was too lazy to pay attention to this crazy woman. Estimating that the time was almost right, I directly put the matter of the contract on the agenda. That afternoon, I called Anya. "Anya, it's been over 3 months. How's the investment going?" Anya hemmed and hawed for a long time on the other end of the phone, and then apologized to me with a voice full of guilt. "Sister, I'm sorry. The investment failed. The money is all gone." "Yeah, okay. Then remember to pay me back the money." Anya was stunned. As soon as she heard that I wanted her to pay back the money, her voice suddenly became sharp. "Pay you what money? Doing business always has risks of profit and loss. There's nothing I can do if there's a loss. Why are you asking me for money?" I moved the phone away from my ear, waited for her to finish ranting, and then put it back. "You can check the contract yourself. It's clearly written. If you can't pay, I'll file a lawsuit." After saying that, I hung up the phone without waiting for her reply and then contacted a lawyer to start preparing the lawsuit materials. I guessed that Anya would definitely tell our family about this matter, so I refused all calls. But I didn't expect that they would come directly to the Vincent family's house. In Vincent's ancestral house, my father sat opposite me and smashed a teacup with a bang, while Anya was sobbing in Faye's arms. "Aaliyah, she's your sister. How could you harm her like that?" I glanced at the pieces of porcelain scattered all over the floor and suddenly felt a chill in my heart. Since my father remarried and brought Faye and her daughter into our family, he had never regarded me as his biological daughter anymore. He gave me an excellent material life, but he gave all his partiality to Anya. No matter who was right or wrong in any matter, I was always the one who would be scolded unconditionally. I looked at Anya. She shrank back and lowered her head when she met my gaze. "Anya, do I need to show them the contract you gave me? Who was the one who tried to harm others first?" Hearing this, my father suddenly stopped me. "Don't show it. Anya mentioned this matter to me. But she's still young and naive. She doesn't understand the ins and outs of this. Maybe she just made a mistake when drafting the contract. As her sister, can't you just let her off?" Suddenly, my heart ached, and tears fell down without warning. So he had always known. He had been conniving at Anya's harm to me from the beginning to the end. So I was far less important than a stepdaughter in his heart. I lowered my head and couldn't say a word. Beside my ear, my father and Faye were still being aggressive. "If you sue her and take her to court, what will she do in the future? Aaliyah, you're a good girl. Our Anya doesn't have as prominent a background as yours, nor does she have the confidence to be as willful as you. She just wants to live a peaceful life. Could you please let her go? I'll kneel down for you." After saying that, Faye was about to kneel down to me, but was immediately supported by the 2 people beside her. This scheme that started with Anya suddenly turned into a farce where I was the one being unreasonable. I was just about to retort when suddenly there was the sound of the door being unlocked behind me. Vincent strode in with a cold air about him and sat beside me. His dry and warm hand tightly held mine, and when he opened his mouth, there was the oppression of a superior. "Father-in-law is really free today. You brought the whole family to bully my wife while I was away." My father was just about to explain when Anya preempted him and started her pretentious act again. brother Vincent, don't blame them, and don't blame my sister either. My sister didn't mean to make me bear such a huge debt. It's all my fault. I didn't read the contract carefully. Vincent looked coldly at the three people in front of him and finally fixed his gaze on Anya's tear-stained little face. Since you know it's because you're stupid. Why are you making a fuss? The legal advisors of the Vincent family are quite famous in the whole industry. My suggestion is that Anya should raise money quickly. Moreover, there are surveillance cameras in the Vincent's ancestral house, and I also have a copy of the original contract. Father-in-law, if you don't mind me revealing the whole story, you can go out of the Vincent family's house and tell others that Aaliyah is an ungrateful and heartless person. Vincent's words almost blocked all of Anya's ways out. The three of them had livid faces. Seeing that I didn't express my stance for a long time, they slammed the door and left in a huff. 08 I was still wondering why Vincent was so aggressive in his attitude today when I saw him hand me a file bag with a serious expression. I found out the thing you asked me to check last time. You can look at it, but try to stay calm as much as possible. I guessed about 7 or 8 parts of it when I saw his reaction, but when I read on, my hands still shook uncontrollably with anger. I was somewhat prepared for the fact that my father and Anya were related by blood. After all, the three of them seemed more like a family, but what was unexpected was that it even involved my mother. My mother passed away when I was too young to remember anything. My father had always told me that she had a hereditary mental illness in the family and chose to commit suicide after falling ill. But it was clearly written in this information that she suffered from postpartum depression because Faye called to pressure her during her pregnancy and then had a miscarriage due to excessive worry. She couldn't resist the family's pressure and had to stay with my father until she got pregnant again and gave birth to me. But Faye still didn't let her go. At that time, Faye was also pregnant with Anya. She came to provoke my mother, which made her depression recur, and she jumped off a building. Soon after her death, my father blatantly brought Faye and her daughter into the Aaliyah family. I cried my heart out in Vincent's arms. In my previous life, my mother died at the hands of Faye, and I died at the hands of her daughter. In this life, I will make each of them pay for their blood debts. Vincent held me in his arms affectionately and whispered in my ear, "You can feel free to use me. I'll help you. I'm the sharpest knife for you." The next day, the news that the Vincent family withdrew its investment from the Aaliyah family caused an uproar in the entire business circle. Vincent was using the reputation and prestige that he had accumulated as a businessman over the years to bet with me. It's not hard to imagine that my father led people to surround my house again, but fortunately, we had predicted it in advance and moved to another place overnight. The marriage alliance was originally a way for the Aaliyah family to marry up. If it weren't for Vincent's affection for me, Vincent probably wouldn't have even glanced at the Aaliyah family's status. Once Vincent withdrew his funds, the Aaliyah family's capital chain would be broken immediately, and no one would be willing to offend Vincent just for this one family. I heard that my father's hair turned white overnight. I no longer want to call him father now. He's just Jonathan. Despite being busy with many affairs, the preparations for my wedding with Vincent were still proceeding as scheduled. He took me to try on the wedding dress, and it was the first time I saw a man cry for me. Vincent's expression was still cold and stern, but his eyes were red, glistening with tears. He leaned his head against my neck and whispered, "I'm so afraid that this is a dream. I always dream that you leave me, and I also dream that I marry someone else." I stroked the back of his head to comfort him. "It's not a dream. Vincent, I won't leave you. We'll get married soon." 09 My wedding with Vincent was set for a month later, April 17th. He said it was the day when he first met me. Vincent had to prepare for the wedding affairs and also deal with the company's social engagements. As a result, we didn't have much time together, and he often didn't come to lie beside me until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, reeking of alcohol. I didn't take it seriously until one day a strange number sent me a photo. In the picture, Vincent's eyes looked tired and hazy, and there was a hand on his chest. I recognized that bracelet as Anya's at a glance. I was also quite familiar with the background of the picture. It was a club that Vincent often went to. I didn't expect her to be so bold as to set her sights on Vincent. I immediately drove there. On the way, I called Vincent's secretary and asked him to arrange for a few reliable and discreet people to accompany me. When we arrived at the entrance of the club, Secretary Zhou and his group arrived at the same time. After explaining the reason, the manager directly led us to the private room where Vincent was. Sure enough, before we even went in, we could vaguely hear a woman's scream and a man's roar, "Damn it! You're not Aaliyah, Vincent. Don't." I pushed open the door and rushed forward in time to hug Vincent and stop his action. In the room, there were fragments of broken glass and ceramics all over the floor. Anya, wearing the clothes she had taken from me before, was squatting on the ground, hugging her head and crying bitterly. Vincent was holding a table lamp in his hand and was almost about to smash the person on the ground to death. I touched Vincent's face. It was abnormally hot, his breathing was rapid, and some parts of his body were also unusual. He had been drugged by Anya. I stared at Anya hatefully and squeezed out the words through my teeth one by one. Take her to another room, lock the doors and windows, and don't let anyone in except me. Anya's wailing voice was instantly cut off outside the door. I helped Vincent to the sofa. After he saw clearly who it was, he quickly turned me over and pinned me down. I felt the indentations of the tooth marks on his tiger's mouth that he had bitten himself, and my heart ached. After helping Vincent relieve himself, it was almost dawn. I took advantage of his deep sleep and walked into the room where Anya was in the hazy morning light. Seeing that she still had the nerve to sleep, I got angry and splashed a basin of cold water on her to wake her up. Anya screamed and sat up from the bed. Then I slapped her and she fell to the ground, only able to shout at me helplessly, "Aaliyah, don't be complacent. Dad will make a comeback sooner or later. At that time, I'll make you kneel down and apologize to me." I opened the window. The morning breeze was cool and blew away much of the restlessness in my heart. I expressionlessly grabbed Anya's neck from behind and banged her head against the glass again and again until the right side of her face was a bloody mess. "But now I'd rather make you kneel down and apologize." What should I do? Half of Anya's face was stuck with countless tiny pieces of glass. As a little princess who had been pampered by Jonathan since childhood, how could she endure such pain? Hearing this, she immediately cried and knelt down on the ground, kowtowing, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have harmed you. Please let me go." I squatted on the ground and smiled at her. "Thank you for your apology, but I don't accept it. You shouldn't have touched Vincent no matter what. So, Anya, go to hell." When I went back to Vincent, he had already woken up and was sitting blankly on the sofa, recalling what had happened last night. When he saw the blood on my hand, he frowned. I immediately leaned over to kiss him to comfort him. "Don't worry. It's not my blood." When Vincent and I left the club, there were already a lot of people and policemen gathered downstairs. We passed by the crowd and didn't stop for a second. In the end, Anya was judged to have committed suicide by jumping off the building out of guilt. This was my revenge on her. I moved my bracelet to cover the scratch marks on my wrist. She was really strong. It took me a lot of effort to throw her down. One down, two to go. I heard that the couple of the Aaliyah family were devastated when they learned of their daughter's death. Faye even fainted on the spot. Out of kindness, I visited them with nutritional products and fruits. Unlike before when they were glamorous, Jonathan was now heavily in debt and his temples had turned gray with worry. When he saw me, he wished he could skin me alive. Faye still put on that disgusting act of a loving mother, weeping and persuading me to leave and not make Dad angry. I was wondering why Faye was still willing to stay with Jonathan even though he was bankrupt. After asking someone to inquire, I found out that she had bought a large amount of accidental insurance at a high price. Such a good opportunity, how could I not give her a hand? I invited Faye out alone and gave her a very considerable sum of money. "To be honest with you, I know that you bought a huge amount of insurance for my father. I won't compete with you for it, but you need to put this matter on the agenda as soon as possible. I hate him for ignoring me since I was a child. I can't wait for him to die. After it's done, I'll give you another sum of money. I won't claim the insurance compensation, and I'll also ensure that you won't be caught. I'll send you abroad." Faye wasn't that easy to fool. She looked at me suspiciously. "Why should I believe you?" "You don't have to believe me, but you have no other choice. I'll send people to keep an eye on you 24 hours a day. Once you take action, they'll take pictures as evidence. Unless you're sure that you won't leave any evidence, you won't be able to escape." Faye lowered her eyes and seemed a bit moved. I took the opportunity to sweeten the deal. "Where do you plan to settle down? I'll buy another property for you." "Deal? Don't forget what you said." Greedy people never change their nature, especially Faye. 10 days before the wedding countdown, Faye called me and said it was done. I took a look at the news report about the gas leak incident and promptly transferred the final payment to her. "After you pack your things, walk towards Central Street. Someone will come to pick you up and take you to the airport." Indeed, someone would come to pick her up, but unfortunately, it wasn't to the airport. I was standing in the dark with a wine glass in my hand until a harsh screeching sound of brakes rang out behind me. Faye, wearing a hood, was dragged out of the car staggering. "Don't be so fierce to her. After all, we were mother and daughter once. Take it off." Suddenly seeing the light, Faye looked down at the ropes on her body, then at me in front of her, and suddenly went crazy and roared, "You bitch. You lied to me. What do you want to do? I'll call the police and have you arrested." I weighed the wine glass in my hand and swung my arm round to smash it into her mouth. "Shut up. Why are you as noisy as your daughter? It's so annoying." Hearing me mention Anya, Faye tried to pounce on me with her teeth and claws, but she could only be restrained within 1 meter by the iron chain, enduring the pain and making some sounds like sobbing. She looked pitiful and ridiculous. "Don't blame me. I didn't mean to kill her. She brought it on herself by insisting on pestering Vincent. You too. It would have been nice if you had kept quiet and not let me find out. But you had to come in front of me and let me discover your secret." Faye's expression suddenly became terrified. I didn't have the patience to beat around the bush with her anymore. I directly tied her to a chair, poured gasoline all over her, and set fire to the remaining hatred with a single match. In my ears were the screams, and in front of my eyes was the raging fire. Finally, everything came to an end. Towards the end, I received a call from Vincent. He asked me where I was. An abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone before he said, "Okay, I'll pick you up." I squatted on the ground bored, and smashed the bones that hadn't been burned to ashes. When I saw Vincent again, he immediately hugged me in his arms. "You could have told me. I could have done all these things for you." I smiled and rubbed his earlobe. "You're my puppy that I raised. How could I bear to let you do it?" Vincent accompanied me to clean up the scene. Instead of driving home directly, we went to the airport. The two of us randomly took a flight without taking any luggage and started a one-week pre-wedding trip. In April, the flowers in the south were in full bloom. Vincent took me to see the scenery that I had never seen before. I laughed loudly on the yacht. He carefully protected my waist beside me and kissed me at the moment when the dolphins jumped out of the water. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the sea. When we were walking on the beach, I couldn't help asking the question that I was most curious about. "Vincent, how did you persevere for so many years?" Once liking someone becomes a habit, you won't feel like you're deliberately persevering. Moreover, I could see you every day. Although it was only one-sided, it was enough to make me feel less sad. I chose to face Vincent's love that had lasted for so many years head-on for the first time, and I was unexpectedly touched for a moment. Actually, when I first saw so many photos of myself, I was a bit scared. But it wasn't because I was afraid of you. It was just that I felt that my privacy had been exposed to the sunlight like that. As for your love, I've never doubted it since we got our marriage license. This time it was Vincent's turn to ask questions. "Then why did you suddenly agree to get married? You had been rejecting me all along before." After thinking for a while, I decided to tell him everything, because I had a dream. In the dream, I didn't marry you. My sister took my place and even killed me. Nobody cared about me. In the end, you avenged me and died together with the murderer. Vincent seemed a bit relieved after hearing this. He took my hand and kissed it on his lips. "That's good. I was still worried that you would be lonely by yourself." I suddenly realized that Vincent's love for me was so pure that he could even disregard his own life. After staying in the Seaview room with Vincent for 7 days, we still rushed back to prepare for the wedding. Actually, Vincent had already arranged most of the aspects properly. Only the guest list and the final selection of jewelry and the wedding dress needed me to go through them again. Looking at myself in the mirror, I suddenly remembered the scene in my previous life when Vincent burned himself and Anya to death in the Vincent family's ancestral house so resolutely. I couldn't help but feel a bit dazed. Vincent put his arms around my waist from behind and kissed me on the shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "Well, I'm thinking about the scene in the dream that I told you before." Vincent's arm around my waist suddenly tightened, and his voice sounded a bit worried. "Are you scared?" "No, after all, those were just things in the dream. We're already married." On the wedding day, guests from all over the world gathered together. I walked towards Vincent with the long train of my veil trailing behind me. Both of us were alone. I walked towards him all by myself, and he welcomed me all by himself. We exchanged rings under the witness of everyone and swore, "Till death do us part." I took Vincent's arm and toasted to the guests round after round until I couldn't hold my liquor anymore, and he arranged for me to go to the room and wait for him first. That night, Vincent had drunk a bit too much, but his eyes looking at me were shining brightly. He whispered in my ear, "Aaliyah, let's have a baby. I want to see what you were like when you were a child." I readily agreed. Then, I don't know where I found a silk ribbon. I wrapped it around Vincent's wrists a few times, and he just smiled and silently allowed me to do what I wanted. "Then you have to listen to my commands tonight." "Yes, princess. Please give your orders."